All right, go ahead, Michael. You were thanking Leslie.
Yes, thanking her for showing up and bringing
On
her
time.
expertise on some of the issues that we have. Leslie, our audience would be very interested in getting to know you. So, how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Leslie Corbly. I'm a attorney, author, and I actually wrote a book of poems as well last year. So I wear many hats. I've worked in journalism, nonprofit, done a lot of nonprofit policy work, and now I'm practicing father's rights law in Utah.
Okay. One of the things that you do is you focus on misuse of data.
Yeah. Yes, I did a lot of privacy policy work back in the day. So I actually assisted in drafting and shepherding through the first bill in the nation that requires warrants for geofence searches. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with geofence searches, but that's where law enforcement will draw a boundary around a crime scene, and then they'll go to large companies, Google, for example, and request all user data. And they'll say it's anonymized, but the goal is to search for a suspect. So that can obviously create some problems. So there's been examples. I think one individual was wrapped up in a criminal investigation because his bike route was around the crime scene, so it made him look really suspicious. But in fact, he had a pretty innocuous reason for being near the scene of the crime at that time. So yeah, that's one of the things I did in my past, and that those kind of issues, by the way, aren't going anywhere. I think that that's going to be the name of the game in the future. It's going to be really hard to combat. As much as I want to see policy measures be effective in that arena, um, the reality is that digitization is going to have lead to these kind of easy for surveillance to occur, and it's going to, I think, fundamentally change governance as well, just because you can already see it in the investigations that are occurring in the Trump administration, where they're investigating what happened with Russia Gate and whatnot. You see how easy it is to weaponize surveillance against Americans in ways that are inappropriate and amount to an abuse of power. And that structure, as much as I wish it was going to go away with Donald Trump, it won't.
Is there
That structure is going to remain the same.
is there a concern about AI being capable of generating false data?
I mean, I think there certainly should be a concern about AI being able. Who knows what AI can and can't do, or what the dangers are there? But obviously, false data would be part of it, as would surveillance, and what's that going to do to society when you're sort of always surveilled? I mean, think about when you were a kid. What would it have been like if your parents could watch you all the time? There's a sort of stunting, I think, of your humanity when it comes to having these surveillance systems always watching. It leads, in my opinion, to more performance based humans, like people engaging in more performance based behavior rather than integrity based behavior. Because integrity is really what do you do when you're not being monitored, right? Your character is sort of defined by how you behave when the doors are closed and there's no one there to hold you accountable. And if you're always being watched, you kind of don't even get to flex that muscle at all. And sure, everyone fails, but right now I think the concern is to what degree do people have have the opportunity to try in some arenas. I mean, look at China, could be an example of that.
I've heard some people say that AI at times hallucinates.
Yes,
That's how they're saying it. I mean, Scott Adams is the one who's mentioned it quite a few times.
yes, it does. It does, and it's interesting too because I practice family law, and one of the things I notice, it's not a terrible strategy from an interpersonal standpoint, but I noticed that individuals will talk to Chat GPT a lot about their relationships, and so that's fascinating. Which is, again, it makes sense because like if you're especially in a bad relationship, getting information about a possible issue your partner has psychologically, it's like it can compile all that information really quickly without having to go to Google. But again, it's another way that you're feeding into the algorithms, and they're going to have more and more of individuals' personal data. So hallucinations are certainly a problem, but as are false interpretations of the data that the AI is fed. So it might not even be hallucinating, but there's obviously bias wired within these automatic systems. They aren't without perspective to some degree.
I think part of the problem there is that the AI sees, reads everything, and like you say, it doesn't have a chance to digest it and properly. So a few weeks ago, I asked something about President Trump and the assassination attempt in Butler, and it said that they came back and saying that he was alleged to have been shot. Da, 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 da. I said, "What do you mean alleged to have been shot? Wasn't he really shot?" And then he came back and apologized and said, yes, he was shot. There really was an assassination attempt, and so forth. But it gathered stuff that the mainstream media puts out there. I call them corporate media, put out there, putting up doubts, and Democrats putting up doubts that he had been actually the target of an assassination attempt.
And that is really dangerous, which is why critical thinking which is I think undervalued in society right now, is so important. Because again, these bots have some value in the sense that if you understand how to think critically, you're not just going to take whatever they say at face value. Now, the privacy concerns are somewhat of a separate issue, but politicization of the responses they're going to generate on specific things related to global or cultural or political affairs is not new, I don't think. Everyone knows Silicon Valley and those in the tech sphere lean very heavily to the left. So that should come as no surprise. But there's a lot of, like I said, danger that it's an uncharted territory. There's a lot of danger. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. These are just going to be the conditions people have to live in for the next coming generations. And my hope is that people will start to understand that and to operate accordingly, because solutions, in my opinion, won't come if we think we can stop the wave of what's coming. We're going to have to figure out how to solve the problems within the system that's emerging, because the system isn't going to go away.
The problem I see with all that is this. Society as a whole is being taught to doubt itself.
Yes.
And the thing is that AI has become the new expert. And in the COVID groomed us to listen to the expert. If a person was a scientific expert, there was no questioning. They were the expert. They knew, are you the expert? Are you a doctor? No, you're not. Then you have no right to even think about this. You have no sufficient expertise. So as we become, as a whole, as we become less sure of ourselves, we become more dependent upon the expert, upon outside sources to lead us, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a Democratic Party problem. And I hope I haven't crossed the line on that one. But anyway, the thing is that so right now, humanity as a whole, let's forget United States, humanity as a whole is at a low when it comes to feeling sure and about themselves, about having a connection with a higher spirit, and about having the intellectual development to be able to do the critical thinking that you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. It's a major problem, but my hope is that will start to change. So I think I think there's signs of that already. It's going to be a long process, though. It's not going to happen overnight. But the reality is that we're going to have to become more comfortable feeling sure of ourselves in the absence of supporting data. And what I mean by that is if you have the expertise, whether it's medical, and in this case, I think it's medical, legal, it could be journalistic, whatever it is, those people who represent expertise in that domain. If those domains become corrupted and polluted, you're going to have to go, okay, we're now in a situation where the expertise of various domains is no longer trustworthy. Well, when that happens, it means that you're often going to be operating without as much good information as you otherwise wish you could have. Because again, if your medical field is corrupt and polluted with corruption and junk science, well, what are you going to do? You can't go and generate, years worth of scientific data or journal worthy arguments to counter what the expert class is telling you, right? Because obviously you can't do that. Your entire expert class in that domain has been compromised. And that's essentially where we are, which is fascinating to see what RFK Jr. is doing with that. But my point being, I think people are going to have to become comfortable with doing enough critical analysis to go, I don't trust you, so I'm not going to operate on what you're telling me. And I'm going to be comfortable making decisions for myself or my family or whomever I have the ability to make decisions for, even though I may not have access to enough information to counter what they're being told by the expert class. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't solid experts, Peter McCullough, for example, who may have access to enough information to robustly counter some of the junk coming out of various expert fields. My point is the average person. I mean, even myself as an attorney, I'm an attorney. I'm not a medical scientist.
We forgive you.
Yeah. I know, we all have our flaws, but my point being, I think people need to become more comfortable going, well, I own myself, and the reality is that means I make decisions for myself. And yes, there are people who know more than me in various domains, but at the end of the day, I am the judge as it relates to how I conduct myself, to what goes in my body, to how I behave, to how I relate to the world. And that's where, again, it's going to be a long haul process, but I do think people are getting ground down by the totalitarianism and the rise of this sort of, you have to trust me, I'm an expert. I think you saw that in the backlash that occurred after COVID. And I think it has quite a bit to do with why Donald Trump won re-election in 2024. I think that had a lot to do with the fact that people are kind of just, there's a class of people in this country who are quite over that mindset. Again, it's becoming, I think, more entrenched systemically, to your point regarding AI and various ways that our governance is going. But I think from a ground lay level, people are getting quite tired of it, and it's going to be a long process to try to push against these systems that are kind of pressing us down into dependency. And I agree with you, dependency is on the rise, and it is the goal, in my opinion, of the Democratic Party. I think that's how they maintain power. I actually compared the Democratic Party to the Devouring Mother in my latest book, so you're in good company. I'm not offended by that.
You can't tell,
I want to get now to one thing in the book, but before we get there, just want to say that I just want to interject that this thing about doubting experts, you can have experts that are on both sides, like Dr. McCullough, whom you mentioned, the rest in the CDC, and Dr. Fauci, who I think is the modern day Mengele. Yeah, I mean, you have to make a decision yourself. You have to have critical thinking skills. You have to actually think about what they're saying, digest it, and then make your own decision that way, right?
Absolutely.
Not just rely on this expert or that expert, but see which one do you think is really telling you the truth. Part of it's going to be gut feeling, okay? And my gut feelings were against everything the CDC was and who were telling us.
But part of it is also that data is so complicated, especially with how advanced technology is becoming. You'll be told things in the medical field are safe and there's no danger and not to worry about it, and then 20 years later there's a lawsuit, right? Because there was something that wasn't yet uncovered. And again, and that's not to say you just think from a purely conspiratorial or knee-jerk reaction standpoint, but the reality is you're balancing the fact that when you try to manipulate things with increasingly sophisticated scientific advances, you're looking at a lot of variables that could create problems you don't know about until down the line. So you just have to keep that in mind. That's the same with the COVID. I thought there was a lot of validity to being skeptical of the COVID shot. And now that is emerging. More and more information comes out down the line showing that there could be cause for concern. But that's, again, not going away. Our scientific advances are becoming much more sophisticated. So what could or couldn't cause harm is, again, difficult sometimes to prove on the outset, right? You sometimes need information. And that's where there's a danger in just embracing every single scientific advance as if it's free of any danger because you've been told so by the expert class. That's not how things pan out in practice.
I think what really is magnificent is during these times when we are being crushed by the dominant elites, okay, there are heroic people that come out like you. I know you love this man, Bonhoeffer.
Right? Yes.
Okay. So like him and like a number of other people, Trump included, right? So the thing is that out of nowhere, these heroes are forced out of their comfort zone and stand for us. And I think that's something to applaud. The human spirit. There are people out there that are willing to literally take a bullet, like Charlie Kirk did. I mean, it just that was a big loss.
And you're right. The same with the doctors. There were some doctors during COVID that took quite a bit of flack. Peter McCullough is one of them, but Jay Bhattacharya, who now runs the CDC. So that's why I'm interested to see what the expert class will maybe be shaken up, because it seems like some of those fringe voices, people who are really on the alternative space, are coming into power, which is fascinating because then you hear the counter arguments. Everyone's argument flips. People who were talking about how you should just trust the experts in power all of a sudden revert to saying, oh, well, that's polluted and corrupted, which again kind of proves the point that the reality is no one really fundamentally no one really just trusts experts. There's always a philosophical underlay, right? And that's just how the world works. No one just says, "Oh, an expert told me, therefore it's true." And that's where I'm hoping people start to see more of that and go, again, who's in charge of what goes into your body? That should be you. If I don't want a shot, I shouldn't have to take it.
Unless here's the funny thing. Those people that are arguing that my body, my choice when it comes to abortion, do not believe the same thing when it comes to you sticking a needle in your arm.
Which is odd because you did have the choice not to put the thing in you, and we got to be polite.
Not
you had
really.
a choice as to what went in and what didn't. And from
the experts are not only wrong only in medicine, because even in the archaeological world, for example, the Egyptologists say, "Oh, Egypt was formed in this era," and so on and so forth. They keep discovering proof that things were erected in Egypt long before the Egyptologists say that they were, and they just refuse to believe it because they're the experts. You've got to listen to them. Meanwhile, you have other people who are like, who's that guy who did that series on HBO or Showtime?
Graham Dorsey.
Graham something.
Graham. Sorry.
Anyway, he and others like him have been ostracized, and some of them are just journalists. Some of them, like Dr. He starts with an S. I can't remember his name. He has discovered through some kind of underground sonar that there is indeed a chamber under one of the Sphinx paws. He's not allowed to go there and get it. Now he's not even allowed in Egypt. Okay, and he's an archaeologist. Because he's going counter to the head man over in Egypt.
You haven't been keeping up with that information. They actually discovered. They just exposed it, and they discovered that underneath the paw, with what they thought is a chamber, is actually a large red rubber ball. It's a paw. I'm sorry. I was trying to make a joke.
He occasionally tries these attempts at humor, and as you can see, he fails miserably.
Funny once you think about it. Like a cat chasing after it
would have been better if you said a tennis ball. If you said a tennis ball, it would have been funnier. Okay.
I didn't think of it.
Realistic. Anyway,
Next.
So let's get back to the Devouring Mother. What do you have to say about the Devouring Mother?
So actually, sure. So Devouring Mother's archetype of female predation, which would be weaponizing the dependency status of a minor or someone under her care, and with the purpose being actually the self-aggrandizement or value to the mother, right? So it's using dependency against the dependent rather than taking care of the dependent. You're extracting something from the dependent through the guise of caretaking. So an example of that is Munchausen by proxy, which is where a woman creates fictitious disorders for a child and then medicates the child for disorders they don't have, with the goal being that the woman gets some kind of validation, some kind of psychological benefit from being this golden caretaker. Look at me, I'm this amazing mother that takes care of this poor disabled child. And that's the example I use in the book to talk about some of I think that female types of predation are really difficult to talk about in society. And I think they're more emblematic on the left than the right. I think to the degree that there's pathologies on the right, they look more, quote unquote, like what you would expect from masculine. They're more overt, they're more in your face, aggressive, physically aggressive in some ways. Whereas those on the left tend to talk a lot about being bleeding hearts, but there's almost, like I said, a weaponization of that dependency. Rather than assisting people and becoming actually independent, there's a tendency for those on the left and the Democratic Party to focus more on keeping individuals dependent on government in order to survive and calling that dependence care. And that's, again, that concept of wanting to care more about dependence than actual real caretaking, which would be what's in the best interest of these groups, not necessarily what keeps them.
Well, that's also true in the medical industry sometimes, because they're more interested in maintaining an illness than they are in
Absolutely. Well, certainly a lot of the treatment protocols do. They often don't look at root causes, and instead of focusing on root causes and helping someone get to the point where their lifestyle can sustain actual health, it's focused more on masking a symptom or things of that nature. And yes, there's the argument that individuals struggle to change their lifestyle, and that's true. But the reality is, it's also incredibly profitable to keep individuals medicated. And, I think that's a difficult thing to argue. That's just a reality. And the reality is, medical businesses are still businesses, and I think we should be skeptical of them in that way. I don't think that there's any industry or group of people for which funding is necessary that you shouldn't be skeptical of their motives to some degree and be willing to scrutinize what's actually happening in practice.
Well, the AMA and the American Pediatric Association seem to have been corrupted from within by money, probably from pharmaceutical companies, because now they're mandating vaccines for infants starting at 6 months. You're going to have to get the jab 3 times, once and then 2 boosters, starting at 6 months. And it's been proven that children do not need the vaccine against COVID.
Yeah,
And also, COVID is gone. COVID is a flu, and once a flu goes through, the next one to come in is going to be different. So you're getting inoculated against something that is not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's why every time I ever got a flu shot, I caught the flu.
I understand.
When I don't get the flu shot, I don't get the flu.
But I understand because it's a genetic modification that's not really considered a vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
well,
yes.
They changed the definition too of vaccine.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't disagree with any of this at all. I just, again, I think people need to focus on, is someone saying, what is someone saying I need to take care of myself versus what's actually in my best interest? And I think moving back to an analysis of what's in my best interest, what does that really mean, is really important. One of the things that I think shows how little interest those on the left have in what's actually in the best interest of the population is not only that focus on dependency in the medical context, but the generalized victim mindset that is so dominant in those on the left, which keeps people mentally incapable of sort of taking care of themselves and understanding you're not a victim of you are to some degree a victim of your circumstance. We all are. We all have circumstances we can't control, but you have to be willing to get your, to take radical ownership of your own life. And that's not a popular narrative among those on the left. I mean, it's very frowned upon to view life that way. And they very much like their constituencies to be locked in this victimhood mindset where others they believe others have these, whether it's transphobia, homophobia, whatever the various phobias are, where they believe people sort of have this hatred for them that's based on an immutable characteristic. And I just don't think most people view life that way, particularly not in the 21st century. I don't think it's common as those on the left believe. And my concern is the more the left focuses on that, they're going to gin up that kind of prejudice in their opposition. And that's one thing I am concerned about is that, are they going to gin up that kind of increased prejudicial thinking by, for example, honing in so much on distaste towards white males that you create white males who from infancy onward have been just trashed for being white males. Well, what do you think they're going to think when they're 20 years old? They might have prejudices that you built into them by being so aggressively prejudicial towards them, right? There's danger there. And I think those on the left really struggle to understand the prejudices that reside within themselves and how that impacts those that they're around, because they're so used to externalizing that.
Well, the young women these days. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Well, it's just that no one can navigate the world without a series of presumptions.
Yeah.
So, the thing is that we have to establish which presumptions are beneficial to us and which ones are caustic to ourselves or others. And I think that's one of the things that they're playing with. They're playing with this idea of creating presumptions in your thinking, these axioms, which don't give you the freedom to be able to integrate with other people without having this superiority complex,
Yeah, I suppose the superiority complex mixed with an inferiority complex. I'm
yes, that's it.
Because I'm viewed as inferior, but I'm actually not. It's really damaging. And again, when you talk though about those on the left, or to those on the left, that it's a culture where they talk a lot against totalitarianism, against authority, about dismantling and sort of deconstructing prior axioms. But the reality is, again, I think they struggle to understand what their axioms even are and the cost that their axioms have when lived out.
So the superiority is the gift and the inferiority is the platform it's standing on.
Yes.
And they're also,
I'm good because I'm a victim. That's what I mean. You can't get rid of it. It's just
We're all victims. Let's all be
Yeah.
victims today.
and while they are railing against authoritarianism, they are very authoritarian in their views and in their beliefs and what they want you to do.
They absolutely are, and I think they struggle to understand that. Again, it's a lack of ability to self-reflect, and part of it is because they've been shielded, frankly, from that scrutiny for a number of decades. You know, the gatekeeping, those who gatekeep ideas in this country have leaned left for decades, whether that's journalism, education, what have you. So it's somewhat no surprise that they're poor. They don't really do well at self-reflection because it hasn't been required for a very long time, and now they're getting a lesson in self-reflection from someone they absolutely disdain, which is Donald Trump. You know, they're not exactly getting a gentle prodding to self-reflect. Granted, those didn't work. I mean, you look at what the prior Republican candidates looked like, and you know, Mitt Romney was somehow Satan and he hated women, and I mean, you know, so it's no shock in some ways that Donald Trump is the one jolting them into reality. I don't think the more kid glove style Republican politics that was occurring before was going to push anyone in the left to self-reflect. So it was going to have to be something pretty brutal or harsh. And again, they've had cultural power and the presumption that their worldview is moral. Sort of like the way, you know, look back at like maybe 1850, the Christian worldview would have been presumed to be moral, right? You wouldn't have really had a lot of people arguing that. That's, I think, the landscape those on the left are used to having. Well, I'm moral. I'm a good person for holding these beliefs. These are the good beliefs to hold, right? This is what the moral people think and believe. And they're losing that ground. And I think they're struggling to understand how to scrutinize their own beliefs, how to justify their own beliefs, how to understand that their beliefs actually have costs. There are individuals who land on the margins of their worldview, right? These are things they're used to being able to externalize. It's religious or conservative worldviews that have marginalized victims. It's not ours, right? We're good because we like the victims. We care about them. We're taking care of them. They don't self-reflect well, and I think that's hurting them politically a lot.
There's a difficulty with the ideology in the sense that in order to truly live the ideology, you have to have faith in it.
Yes.
If you have so much faith in it that you're not flexible enough in order to be able to navigate in other people's realms, then you become intolerant. So there's this problem. I need to be what I believe, but not at the cost of you.
Well, and everyone struggles with that when you think about it, right? Everyone has a belief system and they want to be consistent and not hypocritical in their beliefs. And yet everyone has to struggle with being flexible enough to understand someone else's belief. Like, hey, I can understand what Funnel thinks because I put myself intellectually in his shoes. Therefore, I may not agree with it, but I understand what you think. And that's where the left, again, struggles. Remember, Charlie Kirk was actually killed on, I would say, leftist terrain, a college campus, and college campuses used to be known for being really good at that flexibility. Let me put myself in someone else's mental shoes and understand their perspective. They're actually that's punished now in elite leftist circles in a way that I don't think it is.
The point of the university.
Yeah, where you aren't really encouraged to think in other people's worldview, because anything to the right is, it's fascist, it's sexist, it's all these big, bad, prejudicial, pejorative names that make you sound like you're awful if you think from that person's vantage point. And so that lack of flexibility is one of the problems on the left. They talk about tolerance, but they practice a lot of rigidity in their thought. And there's always, you can always go too far, either flexible or too rigid, right? Everyone can go too far in either direction, no matter what your worldview is. But those on the left are, again, used to being able to think in their terms and not have to think on the terms of someone with whom they disagree, because that's what's incentivized and encouraged in elite spaces, including universities, law schools, journalism. Most cultural gatekeeping until very recently was governed by those on the left, and I think they're really struggling to maintain that power. And I think they're struggling to figure out how to self-reflect and actually justify their positions. I don't think they've had to do it for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, even this, the millennials are the ones who I think suffer from this the most. The indoctrination of young men from birth in the millennial generation has emasculated them. And I hear and I see a lot of millennial women complaining they can't find a man. Meanwhile, when they're talking to somebody else, they will complain that somebody's too masculine or has toxic masculinity, so forth. But then they complain, I can't find a man, a real man, because all the men that they are exposed to of their generation are a little effeminate, a little, oh yeah, I'll do whatever you want, and so forth. I mean, men have always traditionally done that because, yeah, I want to get laid, so I'll do whatever you want. Okay.
There is another aspect to this problem, that because of the fact that men have been considered toxic and been asked to not behave in a traditional manner, when there's an emergency, they don't step forth because they're afraid of the kickback that'll happen if they step in. Like that gentleman that was on the subway, that the Marine that got all that, I forget his name. But the point is that, and also the
Penny.
Yeah, the Ukrainian lady that was stabbed in the neck, and really there was nobody really stepped up. So the thing is that you're teaching the males how not to be the protectors,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing is that in order to be a protector, there's women are inherently confluent. They're able to go ahead and see all the relationship of a particular subject, right? So the thing is that to be a man, you have to have all of these other subsets that happen. And if you start whittling at those and start maligning them, then what happens is the man that you really wanted in the past doesn't have those resources, doesn't have those supports. So it's like you can't put, a lot of people won't put pink or blue on their baby. And because of the fact that they call that sexist. And my answer is, yes, it is sexist, because that's a little boy, that's a little girl. Start treating them like one. And yes, we become caricatures to a certain extent. But you know what? If characteristic type of behavior wasn't desirable, then there wouldn't be transvestites.
Well, this is what's fascinating, though, when you look at the trans issue in particular, is that with women, it almost reveals what gender roles really are. Because with women, they are asserting agency by becoming the opposite sex. And it's often, I think, attached to a desire not to be harmed, right? I'm going to be a man. I have agency. I can protect myself. I can, do what men do. That's usually, I think, the female motive. When it's the male motive, I think it's generally I don't want to become a predator because of the fear, because of the conflation in society right now with masculinity and predation. Right. I don't want to be a predator, because to be masculine, I could be predatory, and so I don't want to be that. Instead, I want to be a woman, right? I want to not have to, I don't want the agency. Does it make sense? I'm abdicating agency. I want the receptivity that comes with being a woman, because that's easier, right? I perceive that as being easier. I perceive that as a better life. I perceive it as I don't have to worry about myself being a predator or engaging in predatory conduct. So I'm going to transition to the other gender. And by so doing, I'm abdicating the power and the possible harm that comes with masculinity, right? Whereas women are trying to assert power, as in, I don't want to be vulnerable. Because femininity, to some degree, women have a certain inherent type of vulnerability that men don't. Obviously, as it relates to sexual vulnerability.
There's that whole fight or flight thing where women are designed for flight and men are designed for fight.
Yeah, and it's inverting it, right? That's what the women. I think women who want to transition are saying, I want to be able to protect myself. I don't trust that other people will, so I'm going to do that myself. Right?
I think it's more than just a personal identity. It's also trying to satisfy the group that they're with.
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah, but I mean, from an identity standpoint, I don't think it's this. I think there's more going on, is what I'm saying. It's weird because there's a gendered aspect, is what I'm saying. Well, a woman is probably trying to assert agency, whereas a man is fleeing from agency. I want to go be a woman because I don't want to deal with the complications and the power that comes with masculinity.
to agree with you, okay, I'll give you an example. I worked many years in Newark, New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
and I would occasionally see a woman that had no traditional feminine appearance. And I don't think it's because they were trying to be men. They were
Yeah.
not trying to be singled out.
Oh, I see. I see. That's interesting. Yeah.
Trying to hide.
Trying to
Yes,
hide.
because
Yeah.
maybe they did get because, and all of them seem to have been at one point attractive, and they were like the thing that they seemed to use a lot was clothing, like just wearing pants and a jacket, and heaviness.
I knew a girl who was
That's interesting.
6'3". She was beautiful. I mean, she looked like her profile could have been on one of those ancient Greek coins as a
Mm-hmm.
goddess or a queen. And she had humongous breasts. Let's put it that way. She seemed to be trying to hide it all the time because she was always hunched over. No, and I read about that. I read about that where women who have big breasts are self conscious and try and hide the fact that they have them. It's I don't know.
That's
Men, on the other hand, don't try and hide, whatever they have because it seems to be like a calling card. At the same time, it'll turn a lot of women off.
that's the reason why Hugo wrote his book, The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
And that was definitely the inspiration. I recall that from high school literature.
Well,
That was.
Anyway,
going back to masculinity and lack of masculinity.
let's do that.
There was a big uproar when Pete Hegseth said, "No, everybody has to be in good shape, and everybody has to have the same physical, has to pass the same physical requirements, and so forth." And they made a big fuss of it. But a couple of years ago, President Xi of China declared that he wanted to make the Chinese soldiers more masculine.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think there's been a problem up till then because of the one-child policy, and there was a lack of women because they would take female babies, put them out, kill them, and then have another child, not report they had that one, and have another child till they got a male. So there were too many males, and they didn't. I don't know what it was. If my speculation is that there was probably rampant homosexuality going on because you couldn't get a woman. And he didn't want he didn't want his soldiers to be effeminate in any way. He wanted them to be more masculine. That was nobody said a word about that. But you tell us that we want to make our soldiers more masculine and give them toxic masculinity, which is what you need in a soldier. There's a big fuss about it. Why? And the ones who cried about it the most were one, the Democrats, and two, Karens.
Getting back to your exploration of data.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when you present your information that I've seen, okay, and I haven't watched everything you've done, you're talking about the individuals being their data is being misused in order to reconstruct information about them and so forth like that. But I was thinking, what if it's being done on a much grander scale? What if we're doing it to an entire region to find out what the general population believes and how to manipulate that? It also might also be used as different various control groups, such as what type of person is the type of person that you can find that you can trigger to kill somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's being used in a lot of different ways. I don't think you're wrong at all. It's fascinating because I have this idea that the way modern individuals think of God is driven by how much of our life now is turning into a science experiment. So as science has advanced, I mean, it really has. I mean, when you think about how much these systems, algorithms, various data points are used, manipulated, and controlled in ways that people on the ground don't understand. They don't understand the complexities of these systems. Even people who study them don't. Because unless you have specialized knowledge, access to very specialized information, you can't fully understand how some of these systems even work. Who are you or I, for example, to even say how Google's algorithm works, or what it will look like in 10 years. We don't have any clue. The same that could be said for these AI systems. What you know, however, is that they are being used in various ways to exert pressure or control, whether that's individually, regionally. I mean, it's all of the above, frankly. And it makes for a very, I think it breeds a lot of paranoia in the public. That's understandable paranoia. I'm not saying paranoia in the sense of like there's a disorder. I mean fear in the sense that it's rational fear because you don't understand how these systems are working. You don't know when they could be targeting an individual for any number of inappropriate reasons, right? And that feeds into that victim mindset I talked about earlier on the Democratic Party side, which is that people already feel very self-conscious about certain immutable characteristics and they're concerned about discrimination or what have you. And so these systems being able to target individuals so precisely obviously amplifies that fear. You know, what if someone with a particular bias has control of that system and their bias is against me? Oh my God, that's terrifying, right? And there's a reason for that fear. And that's where I think lowering the temperature on some of these things is important, but it's hard to do that in a time period where, like I said, all these systems are becoming more and more powerful, and they're more central to the governance of our lives, whether we like it or not. There's nothing we can do about that. And so understanding that discrimination, I think one thing that helps is understanding that discrimination absolutely is real. And no matter what worldview you have, you're going to have prejudices. And, you know, that's just reality of life. And people are going to have to come to terms with the fact that that type of prejudice isn't going anywhere, whether it's prejudice based on race, gender, political orientation, religion. I mean, there's a whole bunch of types of prejudice that exist out there. And I think, again, we focus very heavily in the past 50 years of critiquing prejudices on the right, and we don't even understand what the prejudices on the left even are, because we don't talk about them. But they exist, and I think we're starting to see more and more of that in like the COVID era, you know, and whatnot, that there's actually a lot of prejudices exist on the left. One example would be, I remember being really struck by how common people on the left, how casual people on the left were when I was growing up, with just saying, oh my God, like, why did you have so many children? Like, they were appalled my parents had 7 children. And they would sometimes make it, you know, I remember thinking, like, which one of us do you think should have been knocked off? You know, like, this is really weird that that you feel so comfortable saying that. Now, obviously, I understand why some people would think they don't want to have 7 children. I don't want to have 7 children. I have 1, and that's plenty. Maybe I could have 2, but, you know, like, I don't want 7 kids. But there's a lot of people my point is there's a lot of prejudices that swing in various directions, and they're going to intersect with these systems. So you're not wrong that they're going to, that they're used regionally. I mean, you saw that happening. We saw that with COVID, right? The amount of pressure that was put on these various tech companies to try to stamp out the ideas that the CDC didn't like during COVID was incredibly high, right? And they complied more or less. And then Mark Zuckerberg does a 180 when Trump's elected.
Well, there's a great deal of naivete on the left in regards that they want a pie in the sky that sounds really great.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a new congressional law. You know, they have this wonderful title, and then you read the law and you discover this is an abomination, but it's got a great title. It's like, hey,
for years and years, the left was always anti-establishment. But the last few years since COVID, it's always been, no, we've got to listen to the man. We've got to listen to the government. We've got to listen to everything they used to believe in or said they believe in before was turned upside down.
Well, they still believe that, except for the fact that everybody that they disagree with is no longer officially part of the government. So
people like me who used to obey everything and my government, right or wrong, I now question everything.
Well, you know, how many times do you hear the Democratic Party say they're all about democracy? Okay, and I won't get into the fact that we're in a representative form of government, but it's a nice term, and I do believe that that's how we get our representatives, through a democratic process. But did Kamala Harris get voted in to run for president? No, she was selected. And did we hear a complaint? No. And that meatball, you know, Tampon Tim, you know, I keep forgetting his last name, Tim's.
Walls.
Yeah. Ow! That hurts. But anyway, the thing is that, you know, so the thing is that I think in their fantasy environment in their head, they don't consider the full meaning of that choice. It's like wind power. Oh, it's free. Let's do that. No, it's not free. But the thing is, you have to look into it and see that it's not free. Oh, we should help everybody with medical care. Why? Well, what about if we exhaust the system? How can we take care of our own? And isn't our house the first house we're supposed to take care of? Isn't your family? I was taught your first loyalty is to God. Second loyalty is to the earth. Third is to your family. Now, you can change that order any way you want. I think family really should go number 2.
No, mine was God, the family, the neighborhood, the city, and so on and so forth, out until the country.
Not everybody was in the mafia.
I'm not Italian, so I couldn't be in the mafia.
Well, I am half Italian, so but my dad's name is Don, and my oldest brother's name is Don, so
Okay.
probably a mafia connection somewhere there.
I'm Italian and Sicilian.
Getting back to your book for a moment again, you said something about the moms who. It struck me that the old stage moms used to live vicariously through their children, okay, especially daughters, and also I think that that's part of what is driving so many Hollywood moms to claim and force their boys to be women, to be girls. I mean, I forget what actress has three African born boys that she adopted, and she is raising them as girls. And there's another one who's got 3 boys, raising them as girls, and you can tell the boys are very uncomfortable, very angry.
First of all, they're not forcing their kids. They're not forcing their kids to be a girl. They're rolling a pink and a blue ball at them, and the first one they grab, that's their gender.
Yeah, but I mean,
You're choosing
you were starting to talk about something about.
I know.
About that in the book.
Yeah, just imagine that you're going to roll 2 balls at a 3-year-old, and you're going to decide their entire fate and say that they chose. How moronic are you?
Yeah, are you going to let the 3-year-old choose to have a permanent tattoo? You might give him henna, but anyway, what is your outlook or your view on this thing about women forcing their transitioning on their kids, especially when it's when the father is totally against it? Although there are couples who they both agree on that because the guy is a cuck and will do whatever the wife wants.
Well, obviously, I think it's really inappropriate, but I think one of the things that's important about this entire conversation to remember is that the world it's so fascinating to me how much of these ideologies become relevant based on scientific advances. So back in the day, think of like generally how society worked. You couldn't have sex change surgeries, you didn't have hormone blockers, you didn't have access to any of that. So all of that's off the table, right, from that standpoint. And then the second reality is that I think we glamorize. I think in the 21st century, masculinity is glamorized. And by that, I mean by women, especially the feminist movement. So think of it this way, like it's sort of glamorized in the sense of we think of agency, power, and control as being existing in men. And for the longest time, that was framed in the context of abortion rights, that men had bodily autonomy and women didn't. What I think is fascinating is that men actually never really had bodily autonomy. The vast majority of men throughout history that weren't of an elite class, were not very wealthy or able to avoid it, were pretty much destined for war. And I don't think of war as somewhere you go if you want to exercise your bodily autonomy rights. I mean, you watch your friends get blown up, so we have this idea, I think, of gender. Our society, what I'm really trying to get at is our society has become more androgynous. We're less connected to the embodied nature of masculinity and femininity because we can avoid childbirth and we can avoid war in ways we couldn't have before. Most men ended up having to fight in some capacity. When they grew up, that was simply what they were going to have to do, whether they wanted to or not. And women were going to bear children, whether they didn't really get a choice. And it's not because they were necessarily raped. This is just how life worked for people. Men had to fight, they had to toil, and they had to do things in an embodied manner that I think made their masculinity something that was part of them in a way that's different now. Now I think we think of masculinity and femininity as something you put on like a costume. because you can in ways, and I mean, you literally can, in the sense of like you have technological advances that are different. You also don't have as nearly as clear of gendered reality anymore, right? Office jobs aren't the same as far as like embodying a masculine or feminine archetype in a way, right? You can avoid childbirth if you would like. If you're a woman, that's not really something that's expected. And I don't mean expected socially, I mean just like biologically, that's what's going to happen to you if you get married, before you have birth control. That you're going to have children most likely because you're fertile, and that's how the world works. And so I think some of this ability to do that plays into parents' decisions. When you talk about why are they doing this, I don't think most people have an awareness of the not that most people are thinking biologically and physiologically about the ways in which men and women are wired differently, and how when you mess with that, you're messing with the integration of a whole person, right? So that's not to say men and women are caricatures of masculinity or femininity. It's to say that a human being is an embodied soul with both physical, biological, physiological, and spiritual traits, and that those are in fact different based on your sex. And I think we've lost touch with that. And so people think of man and woman as something, like I said, that you can don as if it were clothing, right? I want to do this, therefore I can.
Well, it's taken millions of years for us to evolve, and our sexuality has purpose.
Yes.
Okay. So the thing is that in a matter of a few decades, that has been challenged. And the thing is that the directives inside the body, your genetic material, is going to rebel to a certain degree. Now, some people may not be as attuned to the traditional sexual identity, and therefore they may not be harmed by it. But the thing is that I think eventually the reason why we're having all these people collapse and go on a shooting spree is because they can't, and I'm focusing mostly on the one group of the transsexuals.
Mm-hmm.
They can't be a woman, okay? And so what happens? They overcompensate by becoming a Superman and by killing everything, because that's all they understand a man to be, is a murderer. So, and what do they attack? They attack the thing that does not accept them, So they're doing a public service. They're showing their dominance, which they have no choice, and at the same time, it's just a broken mess. And the thing is that,
well, again, that goes back to the idea of ignoring the integrated nature of gender, right? Like that's easier to ignore now. I agree with you that when you misalign that and you mess with that attunement, I think you're messing with a very complex system, and you do that at your own peril. I don't think that means, again, that we have to live out rigid stereotypical roles necessarily, but I do think that there needs to be a return to an awareness that men and women are biologically, physiologically, psychologically different,
right,
from one another, and that means something. Just because we don't have the same social setup, like I said, where men automatically go fight and women automatically have children, doesn't mean that reality, that the genders are different, isn't true. I think what we need to do is think more deeply about what does that mean now? How can we align, how can we better understand that in the modern world, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater? And I think what we've done is throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is, well, it's easy now to act as if every person sort of starts as an androgynous, neither male nor female, and they kind of eventually diverge and become one or the other, as opposed to understanding that these are this is a natural part of our humanity. And how can we in the modern world, again, as technology and ways of living have pulled us away from that attunement, how do we reattune? That's, I think, the question we should be asking, right? It used to be more natural. The attunement was just natural because it's how the world worked. And now it doesn't work that way. So how do we actually keep that attunement alive rather than killing it? Right. I think that would be more healthy.
Well, the question I want to ask you is there a difference between a poodle and a Saint Bernard?
Yes.
Okay, so the other thing I think we also have to remember is that our roots also, various regions of the world, produced different types of people with different kinds of physiological and psychological strengths and weaknesses. I think we also have to expand that to honor and respect the differences in our regional race. I hate to say the word, but yes, nobody likes to use it. But the thing is, there are differences sometimes in race, especially if we're talking about different regions, because then it's a cultural thing as well. But I'll give an example. The people that are Inuit, which are commonly called Eskimo, which is not a desirable term for them, they have physical differences. They have more fat underneath their skin to keep them warm than anybody else.
Because their environment. Yeah.
Yes, and they can eat, I believe they can eat they can eat raw whale liver, which is loaded with some sort of super vitamin, I think it's A or whatever, that would kill you and me. So that's just something. But every particular race seems to have some sort of strength. So the reason why we have different colored skin is to handle our environment. How much sun am I getting? not getting much. Well, I'm going to be white, so this way I can pick up as much vitamin E as possible. So and then so the thing is, we're not just talking about these individuals are assaulting our willingness to recognize strengths in not just our sexual characters, but also in our racial characters. And I understand race was invented like hundreds of years ago in order to create a more exclusionary view of individuals. But I don't necessarily see it that way. I see it as more like a brood, so to speak. Like I mentioned, poodles versus Saint Bernards. They're both great dogs. They both have their purposes. They have the strengths and the weaknesses. First of all, I don't want to feed a Saint Bernard. It's too expensive.
Fair enough. Yes, well, I think that's a part of equality. There's a difference between equality of worth and dignity and thinking of everyone as having equal traits, right? So that's part of the concept of, I think, equality on the left equals everyone's the same. I think equality in their eyes is sameness, which is more equity, rather than equality being equal dignity, equal opportunity. So, for example, there's always outliers in every group, and those outliers having equal opportunity doesn't mean that the group characteristics don't have meaning, right? So there's always been men who are more feminine and women who are more masculine. For example, the poets were maybe made fun of by the warriors. I don't know. It doesn't make them less male, though, or less man. And that again, there was, I think, a natural awareness of some of these things before. I'm guessing I'm speaking more in the gendered sense, but again, there's always outliers. Like, that's fine.
Yeah, you're speaking to aggressiveness, degrees of aggressiveness.
Yes, but they're not the same. The sameness element, I think, is what's dangerous, is not recognizing valid differences that actually matter in the real world. Because again, I think the difference between, I think Ray was mentioning this earlier, where women are complaining about not being able to find real men, for example. That's a real problem because of the lack of attunement and a lack of awareness that the sexes are different. It's, again, become almost more androgynous, where everyone's sort of able to be the same. Well, we're all humans. Well, that's of course true. Men and women have equal dignity. I don't think many people are arguing that anymore, even though maybe that was an issue. Sure, that's an issue for some. It's been an issue in the past, but that need not negate the biological and material differences between the sexes that, in fact, when they work together, work really well.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's the goal. The goal is, like, when you attune to that reality, you're actually better off. It's in your best interest to do that rather than to pretend it away. It's not helping you to pretend that we're all sort of this androgynous species that can be either male or female. Like, there's actually a reality, an embodied reality to being male or female. And when you embrace that doesn't mean you have to, like I said, that doesn't mean you have to have a specific occupation or that it's going to look caricatured. It means that you're aware of those differences, and rather than running away from them, you're embracing the distinction, so that when you come together, you do so in an appropriate, healthy, healthy manner. And I think that when men and women cooperate in that way, they're a lot stronger than when they are at each other's throats or when it's a power struggle.
Speaking of that brings me to what I've been meaning to ask you. Do you think that these, especially these Hollywood moms, who, but even people who aren't famous, who insist on transitioning their boys to and raising them as girls, do you think it's because they inside? I mean, I don't know if you came across this in your research for your book. Is it? Do you think possibly because they just hate men and so they don't want to raise a man? They want to raise a girl. Is it because they are trying to get revenge against men? You have any thoughts on that?
I think it's more of a devouring mother archetype to me. I guess the motive could be a lot of things, but I think structurally what they're doing is rather than taking care of the child, which would be helping the child, doing what's in the best interest of the child. Rather than doing that, they're doing what they perceive essentially is in their own best interest. There's a vanity aspect to
They're
it.
like sculpting the child.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. They're molding them rather than guiding them.
Molding them.
Interesting point, though. That kind of you're going to like this. Now, we all agree Elon Musk is a real smart guy. And he also has tremendous resources. Okay, so he's got power, influence, and intelligence. He was tricked into his child being transitioned because he was told that if he didn't do that, his son might commit suicide because he couldn't transition. So the thing is that we talk about the devouring mother and stuff, and that is, I believe, very true. But I think in some cases, people are being lied to and told that their child is in jeopardy, and if you don't do this, they'll die.
And
yes, and if you buy into the idea that men and women are essentially, again, this androgynous framing, like they're the same, well, then why not at least keep them alive? But I think when you have three, it becomes more of there's something going on deeper, I think, than just maybe that issue of it's better to have a living daughter than a dead son, or something like that phrase that is thrown around a lot. But yeah, I agree that there's elements of that. And if you're already in the mindset of like, well, yes, men and women are basically the same, they don't really have any major innate differences. And so, what's the difference?
Well, the thing is that men and women their commonalities are kind of interesting. There's this excellent book called, and you probably won't be able to get a copy of this, but maybe with your resources you can. It's called The Psychology of Romantic Love.
Mm-hmm.
It was written by a psychiatrist, and it focuses on heterosexual relationships. And he says in the book that heterosexual relationships are more dynamic because in a homosexual relationship, you're dealing with two knowns, where there are sufficient differences in a heterosexual that it's more dynamic because there's more unknown factors involved. So that's an interesting. I hope that adds to the conversation.
Yeah. No. I think a lot of it depends on how healthy and functioning the heterosexual relationship is. But I think when it's healthy, right, when it's functioning well, men and women do complement rather than conflict. But I think that largely depends on the health of the individuals in the relationship.
I'm also
going. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of healthy examples of that right now because we've moved so far away from complementarian view of gender that we're, I think, again, in this mindset that men and women are largely interchangeable. And that's just not how that works.
Well, Carl Jung said that we all have an aminus and an amino. Okay, male and a female self. So we're talking about establishing or recognizing the sexual identity that is in alignment with our sexual apparatus.
Yes.
But what's also interesting is each individual also has to find peace with their opposite sexual side. And in this one book, Carlos Castaneda's, which is a story about Don Juan, a shaman, Yaqui shaman. In their particular case, they said a warrior is not truly powerful until he learns to fight for love. Which is a feminine it's okay, I'm going to get slapped for this, is a feminine characteristic, or certainly more feminine than other things. So the thing is that so there's that whole thing, but bouncing off of the fact that the male and the female, when they do come together, they create a synergy that is unstoppable. Together as a team, men, woman together, that's a tough team to beat.
Yin
It
yang.
is. Where they're
Yin
truly
yang.
aligned. But I do think there's a difficulty in those relationships right now because I don't think that there's a lot of help. Again, I just don't think the way we view men and women right now is aligned with biology or reality, and it causes a lot of problems in relationships. And you can go, I mean, you can look at other eras of history. It's not like it's uncommon for this to happen in the sense of, I mean, can you think of a time when men and women really, even ever since, I guess maybe I'm Christian here, so I go back to the fall. Ever since the fall, like the idea is basically that the sexes are at war in a way they shouldn't be, right? So I think you struggle for peace in that domain, maybe, but it's certainly a different flavor now than it would have been 100 years ago. The type of conflict doesn't look the same at all.
Jordan Peterson mentioned the fact that without sufficient discord, you don't trust your relationship because it seems false. So discord is essential for our sense of authenticity, which is another problem. So I think.
Well, that's where the happy wife, happy life stuff I think is really damaging, and why the when women talk about, well, I don't just want someone who's going to say, who's going to do whatever I want. That's very true. I think they want someone who's capable of pushing back in an appropriate way, right? Like someone who's capable of pushing back but not going to run you over at the same time, right? And that's, I think, pretty well established in even literary tropes as far as what women find desirable. You want someone who can push and who's aggressive, but someone who's not going to beat you, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, I remember
one
when I
desirable,
was
one
younger.
too much.
When I was younger, I was at times I tried to be chivalrous. I was trying to be more of a gentleman and so forth, and it cost me a lot in what I wanted to get because I found out that some of the girls, that I dealt with, really wanted a bad boy, and some of them would date guys. I mean, what does she see in this guy? He's a jerk. This and that. And so you have to look at the individual and see, is she looking for somebody who's going to hold doors open and so forth, or somebody who's just going to be like a tough guy and get into fights once in a while, for small slights or something.
See, I
mean, there's a saying that women like the bad boys.
I don't agree with you in the fullest sense. I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think that women truly want the bad boy. But if that's all
some do, some.
Yes, but I think if that's all they think they can get, then better to have a man with testosterone than a wimp that they can push around.
Well, that's what I mean. She thinks that this guy has testosterone. He'll protect me. This guy's too much of a milquetoast. He's not going to do it.
Well, I think a lot of it depends on whether they're selecting for marriage or dating, which, by the way, is another major change in dating in intergender dynamics. Because again, before you had contraception, most women were selecting for marriage because that was presumed to be, this is going to be something long term with children involved. So I think it depends on what they're selecting for. I think women think very differently when they're thinking of who do I want to live with long term versus maybe who do I want a few nights of fun with. I think bad boys win more in the fun domain. I think in the longer term analysis, most women don't want that. They don't want just that, because what's going to be stable?
He's going to be bad.
Yes, and that's guaranteed. Like, great. Do I want to live with that?
Here's some more. I think you can be gallant and not be a pushover. I don't see any. There doesn't.
That's what most men can be.
Showing respect is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of dominance. Is you're showing that you are in charge of that protection, and that woman will feel free within that zone. And
you're willing to give in to certain things, but if the shit hits the fan, shall we say, you're going to be there.
Well, I think women select for structure. They want men who have the independent ability to create and maintain structure.
Right, but
because that structure is safety, right? You're structured, you're disciplined.
Psychologically, I was told that the first thing women notice is a man's hands.
Mm-hmm.
And
that makes sense.
There's an old saying that a man falls in love with his eyes and a woman falls in love with her ears. So
Mm-hmm.
the thing is that when a woman looks, that's why men can be ugly and get away with it. So the thing is that women are looking for a level of confidence. Now you could call it being a bad boy, this, that, or the other thing. But if you have some sort of confidence, and I think this is true of men looking for women, because
Mm-hmm.
there's no victory with a woman who's just melts into you. You
Oh,
know,
no.
so you want someone who has a choice and has chosen you, and I think that's true in both cases. So I think
I think they do select for different things, and I agree with you that the confidence matters. But that's also, I think, where a lot of women fall prey is that if you fall in love with your ears, that's where I think a lot of women end up in situations where there's no follow through, but you're being told the right thing, right? So that's where there can be a false facade or a false bravado in some ways, and then they don't learn that until things, until crisis happens and the person they're with can't rise, right? And then then you've learned in that way. But again, there's pitfalls for both genders, but I do think women care more about structure in a certain domain.
yeah,
Like, are you structured because it signals safety and the ability to show up when things are hard? That's what discipline and structure in a man shows. And that does not have to be done, I don't think, in a specific way, which is where I was getting at. Traditionally, again, men had to fight more. That was just the reality. They had to till soil. They had to go to war. I mean, they had to do things that most men now don't necessarily have to do in the physical sense. But I think that there's a reality inward that you can build within yourself, that can sustain. You're still fighting in the world today. It just looks different, and I think discipline really matters I think for both sexes, but discipline it's usually across different domains. Women have exercised discipline traditionally in different domains than men have. And I think that does matter. Again, that doesn't mean I'm a pretty disciplined person. It's funny because I say all this. I'm like, I have no issue with women doing things men traditionally did. I'm an attorney. I certainly have no issue with that. But I just think you can understand the world works differently now and still understand the gendered nature of reality, and that there is again innate differences between men and women that in fact matter, and that we should learn how to understand and navigate in the modern world. I don't think that means you have to go back to the 1950s where women didn't work. I don't think that's a prerequisite for understanding that there's gendered aspects to the way that we live, and the things that matter to the sexes are not the same.
I remember hearing decades ago that if a couple doesn't argue, something's wrong in the relationship, and it was brought to reality to me because I knew this one couple where his wife did anything he wanted, never had any preferences, never asked for anything, whatever he wanted to do. And you could see he was frustrated that, she was just as docile as a trained dog. Okay. And he didn't like that. I don't know whatever happened to them. I lost touch with them, decades ago, but he was not a happy camper at all. And he was an assertive guy and all, but there has to be, I mean, I've always enjoyed the fact that my ex-wife, my ex-girlfriends, and so forth, and my current girlfriend, there's friction there once in a while. Okay, you want this, I want that. I mean, I'm okay. I'm going along. What do you want to do? You want to go to a movie? You want to go here? You want to go drive here? You want to go shopping? What? I'm okay. If it comes to something I don't want to do, no, I don't want. I don't feel like doing that. I don't want to do it. But if it comes to, I have an opinion on a certain thing, certain subject. You have another opinion. We're going to go at it. Okay, and I think it livens up the relationship.
Well, that one of the biggest problems that we have in the modern world is that we've accepted divorce as an acceptable process, that it's just something you do. In the same way that we've accepted abortion, you just pop the kid out. You don't have
It's an escape.
Right. So the thing is that in the past, divorce wasn't just frowned upon. It just wasn't done. It might
It was
have been
difficult.
done with people with money or whatever, certain circles. But but the thing is, it was anathema, and the thing is now it's expected. Nobody stays married, and you hear somebody's been married for 10, 15 years. Holy smoke, that's a long time. And the thing is that the reason why people get divorced is because they don't stay married. They don't
Fight to keep the marriage
keep the
together.
marriage. Yeah, because they've been told that's not necessary. it's the same. We've been lied to about so many things, but the thing is that you married that person for a reason. And if you had any kind of integrity, you married him for a good one. Why is that reason all of a sudden gone?
Well, I think a lot of it comes as well from people getting, frankly, too comfortable after the marriage. I do divorce law. I'm serious. They see marriage almost as an acquisition. And then, because to your point, I think in a world where you can divorce, it makes it more critical for you to actually put in the work in your relationship. So in the old days, I think there were a lot of relational misery was more common and it was more expected. If your spouse doesn't ends up doing whatever it is they do, you're just stuck with it. And there's nothing you can do about it. And I think people accepted that. I think there was a level of acceptance because that was how the world worked. Now, I think the trade-off in the modern world is you're right that it's easy to divorce, but I think the trade-off people don't recognize is when you enter the covenant of marriage, you're entering a lot of duties. And if you just stay stagnant, you're almost telling your partner that you're not willing to lean into the things that you should to remain married, right? So again, I'm not saying you divorce for any little reason, but I mean, I think people don't think of marriage as conflict repair. I have to be willing to face hard things with you, and it's a lot of front end conflict work, right? And conflict avoided is conflict compounded. And so if you think of it as like, I have to really dig in and with you and be in the trenches with you, I think that often leads to a lot of severed relationships down the line because people think, oh, well, we're married now and, you're not leaving me. And that's a good thing. I'm not saying there shouldn't be security in that way. I just think it needs to be thought of as both security, I'm secure in this relationship, but I'm also willing to go the distance with you, which means fighting for the preservation of a healthy, good connection. Not, you're not going to leave so we can kind of, kick back and do whatever we want, because that's not going to be conducive to a long-term relational.
I mean, if you're in an abusive relationship, that's one thing. You should get out. But if it's not that far, then you should try and make it work. I can talk. I got divorced, but it wasn't because
twice
meant to. I was you twice, but me, I was. I was too tempted. I couldn't resist temptation. Let's put it that way. So that was it. So I have to fight that these days with my girlfriend. I've been with her 25 years now. And there have been times when I've been tempted and so forth. But, I don't want to lose something else that's good.
Well, statistically,
we don't live together, too. That helps because, she lives in another state, in fact, and comes over here every couple of weeks. I used to live in New York when I met her, but I moved back to New Jersey and she started coming here every week. Sometimes, lately, it's been every other week because she hangs out with her granddaughter, who's almost 20 now, and every other week. So I think that helps keep the relationship. If we were together, I think we would have been divorced.
Statistically, women are the initiators of divorce, and I think that is the Cinderella complex.
My ex started it too.
Yeah. So
good reason.
Numbers are rather staggering when you look them up. How many women initiate them, and I think it's back to the comfort problem that you talked about. And
the ease. The worst thing Reagan did, besides the immigration amnesty, was no-fault divorce. Make it easy to get divorced.
Well, I think I will say I think part of it.
Believe me.
I think part of it though is the rise of the sort of what Ray mentioned earlier of the good guy, or sorry, Roy mentioned earlier of the nice guy syndrome. I think a lot of men just won't initiate. I think a lot of women end up initiating the divorce proceeding when there's been a lot of major issues. Again, not universally, but I think that happens a lot more than one would recognize. I think a lot of men
I think it's something that I think it's something completely different. Yeah,
oh, really?
Men don't initiate it because men are willing to accept a certain amount of distress that they go, okay, I'm not happy with her right now, but that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So we're either lazy or we're tolerant. I don't know what.
I do think it's
after
very
boomers-
situationally dependent. I think it's always very context dependent because it's really easy for it to look like it's one party's fault when you know what I mean. Like there's a lot of complexity at play, but I do think that there's an element where for some men it may be an acceptance of conditions they feel are tolerable that to the wife aren't, and they bicker over it a lot, and then eventually the wife leaves, right, and goes, I can't take it anymore. And again, now how valid is it that I can't take it anymore? Obviously depends on what the dispute is, right? What are the disputed conditions, and is it valid for you to handle it or not? I don't know, because
I
those are
think the
very
younger
context
generation have less tolerance for any kind of conflict and say, "Oh no, I'm out of here. I don't want to deal with it." There's no incentive to try and fix it in a lot of cases.
But I do think women initiate conflict more than men in marriages. Like I think they see a problem and they go, "I want to fix it," and the
I
man's
won't tell
less
my
likely.
girlfriend that because that'll initiate a conflict.
Indirectly, you've hit it on the nose. What happens is that the disagreement becomes more important than the marriage. So what happens is two egos are not giving in, and the guy is engaged, and he's just going to stay there. There was this comedian that said men are basically bears with furniture, and there's a certain truth to that. And so the thing is that I think because we've reached the point where women don't see their personal freedom as something that they have. They see it as something that they must defend. And
I disagree though with the being. I don't think physically being there is the same as being relationally engaged. I don't think those are always the same thing. I think you can physically be somewhere and have emotionally and psychologically checked
not for
out.
a guy. Not for a guy. Okay. I don't know. That's okay.
He's divorced twice. Don't listen to him. He's divorced twice.
Because we're practical.
He was almost married the third time.
Yeah.
Oh, but I think sometimes physically, I don't think it's the same.
She's an attorney, so of course she's going to be all about the case. I'm all about, okay, maybe possession may not be important enough, but I possess. I'm here.
No, I do know some couples who remain married only because they can't afford the divorce. He doesn't want to be married with her. She doesn't want to be married.
That's
they live
reasonable.
in separate. They sleep in separate bedrooms and everything.
Okay.
One guy, they had a one bedroom apartment. They have a daughter. She sleeps in the bedroom, the mother, and the husband sleeps on the couch in the living room.
I would have accepted that. I would have accepted that because a divorce was never an option for me. And I know it sounds like a joke, but the secret of staying married is don't get divorced. And it's an oxymoron, but the fact of the matter is that as soon as you start thinking divorce is an option, it's like when you find yourself in a therapist office talking about intimate things that really no other person should know about.
Yeah.
You're messing things up. It's just, and the funny thing is, both of my divorces were non-contested. We used the same lawyer because we didn't want to spend a lot of money.
You could have just gone right to a mediator and skipped the lawyer and hired him.
Now you tell me, where were you when I needed you?
I don't know. I could have helped out.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to use the same lawyer, but she went to the shark before I did, and
They always do.
And that one, I mean, when I used to do translations, I encountered this woman in some divorce cases. What you know what word I want to use? I will not use it to insult you, but she's terrible. And I would have preferred to have used the same lawyer, and I think I could have patched things up. Actually,
By the way,
I had used the same lawyer. Instead, I went with a guy who is a divorce attorney, and he kept antagonizing my ex and the lawyer by constantly making demands that I wasn't asking for.
Right. The word that you wouldn't.
I had to berate him. Look, I don't want this. Why are you telling them this? Because I don't want to do that.
The word that you wouldn't use is a masculine trait.
Well, men can be that too. Some
yeah. But they're better at it.
So tell me what else you have anything else planned for the future?
Yeah.
Anything you're concentrating on doing?
My book just
you want to take this further or what?
Oh, your
I'm
book.
focusing a lot on that. It just came out October 21st, so I'm focusing a lot on that. Really hoping to, push some.
What's the name of the book?
The Progressive Prejudice: Exposing the Devouring Mother.
Oh, wait. Oh, the progressive experiment. Okay, I was thinking it was Devouring Mother. I forgot
That's
it's.
just the subtitle. Yeah, just the
Yeah,
subtitle.
I thought that was the title. My
So
mistake.
that's what I'm focusing on that right now. Obviously, I have my clientele I deal with, and then I sort of try to push these books and ideas in the background because I care a lot about them, and I've dabbled in them for a very long time. So I love the world of ideas and would like to continue writing. Would definitely like to continue writing, but just kind of chugging along day by day, try to push the ideas in the book. I think they're really important. I think we again really struggle with understanding the ways in which progressive ideology manifests itself as prejudice. And I think we need more. So the book takes an approach of it's part autobiography. So it has an autobiographical arc that just deals with my belief formation, but it also alongside that has a cultural critique of progressivism at its core as well. And so it does blends both of those things. And that was very intentional because I think that there's a difficulty with seeing those on the margins of progressive discourse and progressive worldviews because we don't talk about what their experiences are like. And I think those on the right would do well to blend more of the experiential reality with philosophical thought because I think it makes it much more relatable to the public.
I know you have a lifetime of observation and living through this and everything, but aside from that, how long did it take you to write the book from the time you decided you're going to put it down in writing?
I had thought about writing it for a really long time. Now, when I actually put pen to paper, maybe a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote most of it right after I had my baby boy, like as far as the actual copy that you read. But I had thought about writing and had a whole manuscript that I took to a skilled editor back in, gosh, that would have been 2023. So about a year and a half, I would say, for the whole thing.
Okay. So
you got to publish fast too.
You got to get somebody to do a documentary on the lady who wrote the book about the devouring mother. What kind of a mother she's going to be? That would be very, very intriguing.
It was jarring because part of the it was a little jarring because part of the autobiographical aspect deals with the maternal abuse I dealt with as a child, and so writing that postpartum was definitely a bit of a trip. I want to say I started writing again a month and a half, maybe a month after I gave birth, and so that was different.
To some extent, you remind me of Lisa Ekman, who is somebody we just interviewed, and in regards to that, she escaped the Democratic Party.
And she was an operative for them for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
But much of your terminology would have fit comfortably in her conversation.
That's interesting. What was her last name?
Having both on at the same time.
I'd love that.
Yes.
Well, she wants to come back.
Yeah, if you go to our website, you can go right to her. So
yeah, you can see what we talked about. It's
right.
It's the one at the top right now, Lisa Ekman. But Lisa said she'd love to come back, so this would be a perfect opportunity to have.
I'd love that.
These two ladies.
They're going to take over the podcast. We'll be kicked out.
Let them. Hey. We had a good podcast when we did the Gnarly Girls, who are our political opposites, but we didn't talk politics at all. We had a great conversation.
Oh my God! I don't know.
I expected a battle. Okay.
No,
so did Michael.
No, I'm pretty amiable. I have strong opinions, but I'm pretty easy-going as far as my personality. I'm easy to get along with. I like to think, at least, but
these two ladies are politically opposite Micah.
Yeah, but they're spiritual.
But they're wonderful people, wonderful human beings.
They're the same. The thing is, you can have, just because you own the same boat doesn't mean you're going to be going in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's them.
Yeah.
So we're gonna put this video up on our site as well as the number of spots.
I'll send you links to it.
The link to our website will be presently available on our description. Right?
Yeah. Do I have your? Don't say it out loud here. But
actually,
do I have your email address?
Recording.
I believe you do. You should.
I will afterwards. Wait, no, not now. That's what I said. I could send the link to who was it that sent you? Oh yeah, AJ. It was AJ or Sutton who
I think it was
sent you?
Sutton,
Sutton. So,
and that works.
okay. All right. We can do
Remember
that.
to stay. Remember to stay seated until you're uploaded.
Not necessarily.
That's
You can get up
perfect.
if you want.
Yes.
But okay. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to this very interesting conversation on The View from Here, Behind Enemy Lines. And we'll see you again next time. I hope you really enjoyed this. Please rate the program, share this episode with everyone.
And if you need a good attorney, you know where to.
There you go. Oh, can I ask you where you're located? What state? That's all.
Utah.
Utah.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Far away. What time is it there then?
It is
Oh my
12:30
God.
p.m.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming out to The View from Here, and hopefully we'll see you again soon in the future. Good night or good afternoon, everyone.